Oh, God. Hi. Thank you all for coming back. I know I was supposed to be here 2 weeks ago and had the flu, and of course I still have the flu, but then I was under the covers, so I'm a little better. I was told that this talk was supposed to be about origins, and I thought, I'm from Nuremberg, Germany, and I grew up in New Jersey, and then I thought, I hoped I was going to my origins. I was moving towards my origins or something. And then I thought that was probably about as much as I could think about that. But first, in relationship to my origins, I am not the daughter of David Smith. I am the daughter of Tony Smith, which is sort of similar generation, but a different artist. Probably, I always think, when you zoom out in the long haul, there's not a lot of difference between anything that's going on at any given moment, but in the close-up, we like to pretend that there is or something. But I do come from an artist family. Where are these little clickers? I do come from an artist family, and I guess my great-grandfather came from Ireland as a altar carver in Newark, New Jersey. And then I think the other side were boiler makers and then waterworks engineers. So I thought they all had some activity, physical activity in their bodies. And, I suppose my father was supposed to go into the fire hydrant business, and by luck for him, I suppose, the parents died. They lost all the money, they lost the factory, and he got to do what he wanted, and probably out of that I got to do what I wanted. But anyway, I brought slides, and I thought I was trying to look through all my slides, and I've made a lot of stuff by now, and I always really I love to hear someone like Rachel White-Reed talk or Charlie Ray talk, where they can show 10 things and talk for an hour and a half or something about 10 things, and it's really consequent and it's really calm. And I can't do that at all. I am extremely frenetic, slightly anxious person who's kind of moving in all directions at any given moment. And so I thought, I just want to show lots of things. Yesterday I was practically crying that I couldn't bring 4 trays of slides, because I thought at least it can work as a distraction, going like this when I'm floundering and have no idea what to say. And also I talked to a lovely young girl here before who asked me every question that I could make up an answer to that I would say here. So then I thought afterwards now what am I going to do? But in any case, when I was going through the slides, I thought either you're trying to substantiate why the people should have bothered to come see you, or what is to show your prowess or something like that. And and then I thought, you can sort of look in a book if you want to do that. So then I just thought, I rather try. I'm working on a photo show at the moment, and I thought making photographs to me is about. One about cannibalizing my work, but it's also about how I see it, or getting to see it, in a kind of intimate, subjective way of seeing it. So I thought, if I made a slideshow, I could show all my artwork. This is this, this is this, but then at the same time, I could just show much more peripheral things that never get shown. I mean, the only things that have been photographed are probably things that have been in art galleries. I've gone through my art gallery, because otherwise they don't. The things that go out of my house, direct out of my house, there's no record of whatsoever. But the things that went through my galleries, they're records. And so, I thought, then you're always constructing this version of yourself that's much more reductive than your own experience of it, to begin with anyway. But I still thought, I'll try to do something or other. Now, left is that side, and right is that side. I guess we could turn off the lights. The first slide, that doesn't work. Uh-oh. Is the other one turned on? Okay. Okay. Now, do I have to focus it, or does it focus automatically? I hope. That part, that's when I lose it. No, that, yeah. Okay, yeah. If you guys can focus, that's really great. So these are like completely in no order whatsoever, and no chronological order, no material orders, no anything. And I thought when you're saying about talking and listening at the same time, I have to wing it at the same time. And so, like, if you all see me sort of, when I start really floundering, you can really feel free to ask questions, because I thought, oh, I'm getting paid to do this, I should have it together. But I thought, you guys can still take responsibility for being here and ask something. But I guess because I was talking to this girl about printmaking and stuff, and 2 prints showed up, I can talk about printmaking a little bit or something. Or I'll just go through, I'll just have to make it up. But so I came to New York when I was about 24. I went to art school for a year and a half before that, because I was a waitress, and it was much too difficult being a waitress. So I thought, art school must be better. And then I moved to New York, and I wanted to go to school, and I immediately started living with this guy, and he said, if you want to be an artist, be an artist. And I was too afraid to find out whether they had let me into school or not, so I just never went back. I never picked up my work and never went back. So I just started to work, and now I'm 54, so it's been a little bit of time that I have been working, and I have had probably the first 10 years of that, I had jobs at the same time. I worked as, electrician's assistant or surveyor, or, all different kind of doing demolition and things like that. But then pretty much since the time I was 34, I had my first art show till now. So 20 years I've been showing and sustaining myself economically from showing my work. And so I've been tremendously fortunate and tremendously blessed to have a great variety of opportunities working with other people, collaborating with printmakers or people in foundries or studio assistants or curators, or all different situations. And I've also been enormously privileged to I can just keep changing these things.
And how do you stay inspired?
I have no control over that, the same way I have no control over this machine. But I have no control over it. I thought, I think that the main thing about being an artist to me is listening. I've been making these drawings. I went to see Elizabeth Murray's show, and I went to the dinner, and Elizabeth Murray was sitting there at the dinner, and she had had cancer, so she had very short hair, and she was wearing a jacket, and I thought of the painting of Frida Kahlo, of when she cuts her hair, and also early George Boslet's paintings, and it popped in my head, I want to draw Elizabeth Murray as the Annunciation, as when the Holy Ghost comes in the room and tell her she's pregnant. And I thought that's an odd idea to be doing that to someone who's, 65 or something. But I always liked the idea that, the hands being raised to the Holy Ghost, and it's sort of little bit get away from me, get out of here, I don't want this fate. And at the same time going sort of hail at the same time. And, and then I made that, and I thought about it or I didn't think about it, but it just, periodically would sort of go how come I have to be making art like this? And then I thought, it's about being an artist. Being an artist is sitting and waiting, and so for me, part of inspiration and things come from going upstairs in the museum here and scrutinizing every single object as voraciously as I can. And, part of it is just a kind of greediness to have experiences and, be able to, make as many things as I can have the opportunity to, because each thing that you make or each material that you work in reveals something new and unexpected. And, part of it, you get to be in a continuum of history, you get to have a relationship with the past, and then you get to resurrect or revitalize or resubstantiate or something. You get to breathe life into things that have been dormant or that have lost their power or, remain still, that have become still, and you get to kind of be like a fluffer, kind of fluffing them all up again, or, getting them going. And, so it's, and you get to be in relationship to other artists, and, and you get to see that you don't, like for me, I always think the main thing is that you don't, like you have an idea or an impetus, it's like something comes into your brain or whatever. Emily Dickinson says this really great thing. Oh, shit, and I wish I'd written it down. Something about, it comes from somewhere it comes into the mind. It's something like, but we don't know where it comes from. But she says it much nicer than that. But it is that thing about like catching, like the origin of ideas or catching ideas. And, so it's completely informed by the, being in the three-dimensional world, like being in the physical realm and interacting. I always say that it's like, I always say, oh, I'm like a spinster. This is, now you're stuck with me. What? Oh, explain it? Oh, sorry. Okay, this one, then I made this one, and then I made that one. Then I made this slide, which is out of focus, which was, I was given the opportunity to work at Pilchuck Glass School. And I worked with the gaffers there, and I had to figure out a way to work that it was my work. So I had to think of very simple forms to work with, and so I made these glass tiers. And then I made a cast of my mother's feet, and it was about 1989, something like that, maybe 1990, and my sister had just died from AIDS in 1988. So I thought about my mother's suffering and then about the Virgin Mary. And so I made this piece called Mother's Tears. Because I thought about, like, when you go to church, my mother would, like, touch the feet of the saints and stuff like that. You go, like, and all the feet are worn down of the saints from touching them and stuff. And so I've always been very attracted to religious iconography. And not necessarily as the dogmatic belief part of it, but the visualization of spirituality. The other is like a little kore figure making an offering. Because that's another thing that's really good to do, is even when you're not in school, you can go to school. So I was taking a class, a friend of mine was teaching a class at NYU about the Parthenon, and about, her ideas about what the figures were doing. This one on the left-hand side is a fallen Jesus. It was a cast or a copy of about a 4-inch Jesus that I saw in someone's house in Galisteo, New Mexico, and it came originally from Mexico. And it was this, I'm always very, like, one of my favorite sculptures is the deposition in the Louvre of the Christ coming down from the cross. And so, so this is one where it's fallen, where it's sort of collapsing down. And it was right after Anne Hamilton had made her piece at the Dia Foundation, and I knew they must have a lot of material of horsehair around. So we called them up and asked if we could have some horsehair. But then now I can't remember who it is, but maybe Leslie Dill or another artist also that I was with had also used a lot of the horsehair from Anne Hamilton. So I really loved also the idea of recycling other artists' work, like taking that into your own work. It's the top part is a female body and the bottom part is a male body. But that was because I was casting my neighbor, and then he had to go home halfway through. So we had to make do. So it ended up being, sort of like, gender bender stuff or something. But it was really just, completely pragmatic problems. But to me also that's the really big part about, about in relationship to listening as an artist is that you have this impetus, you have this idea of things, but then you get into a relationship with the physical world. And that's where you have to let go of your idea. Like that you get to be, that's what I was saying about being a spinster. It's like that I like having these like objects, with, relationship with inanimate objects. But you get to really see how willing you are to be in it, and then see how willing you are to be responsive to what's actually happening in the present, in the moment. I always think painters are much more in that because they're making, a lot of sculpture is just work, this one here on the left, I'll just talk about the left ones. And if you guys could focus them when they get out of focus. This was, Wendy Whiteman came from the Modern Museum and said I could have a show in Queens at the Modern Museum. And I thought, maybe I should wait till they're back in Manhattan before I have a show. But then she said, you can have a billboard. And I thought, oh yeah, I really want a billboard. And so I thought, I'm going to make all this art in relationship to things in the museum. And one of my favorite paintings there was Henri Rousseau's it's like the tiger eating the white antelope or something like that. And somehow in my mind that mixed up with something about Krishna, which doesn't make any sense, and then about like how to get out of your how animals in a kind of shamanistic relationship give you an opportunity to get out of self, get it like caught out of the self. And so I had these, and then it's also like my, I suppose sort of sexual fantasy life or something like that, adolescent sexual fantasy life or something. But, so I made all these prints of these lions and animals biting women too, and then I thought, you can, like, how do you get, like, I always think about Artaud's drawings, when he just has this sort of stabbing of his drawings, like this, like a little too much emotional investment in what's going on, and but that's a way to relieve pressure and to let the spirit out through the surface of the body or something like that. And then these prints were really also about Currier and Ives, because I love Currier and Ives prints, and they always are pragmatic in their printing and say, they were printed on NASA Street. They say the title, the publisher, the printer, everything. And so I made these prints at Harlan and Weaver on Canal Street. So I put their information and then the title, and then myself as 13 Moons Publication, which is like my pretend printing publication. And so for each thing that you do or don't do, oh no, that was the right one. I'll go back on that one. Each thing that you do, it doesn't work. Oh yeah, that's fine. It doesn't matter. Each thing you do, the more you look out in the world, the more, and I suppose if, I didn't really go to college, so I am, like an accumulating, person who's trying to accumulate slowly an education about the world. So I do it a lot through looking, and through reading, I don't know, history sometimes. Like I get on sort of jags about stuff, but this was a jag about colonial American sort of material culture things. That then you have more resources that you're working from, but that they come from into very convoluted configurations. So to weed out and say, this is about this, or this, I made this, like you make it on a given moment or day, but that one? That was like a beaded curtain from Canal Street, and like those, when they make them sort of iridescent. And then there was a figure behind her that was made in aluminum with a dress on it. And then there was some other things behind there that I don't know what they are. This was, I think originally when I first made my slideshow for here, I made one half all sort of body things like pre-1990, and then in about 1990, actually with Claudia Gould, when she was at the Wexner Center, we made a show there and at the Williams College, and I was preparing for that show, and I had a dream that said, "Get the bird out." And I made this sculpture of a head with a bird coming out on a string. And after that moment, I said, oh, now this is what I'm supposed to be paying attention to, is paying attention to animals, and then sort of slowly over the course of time, animals in relationship to humans. And one was because I think in about 1994, I did a residency at Alfred University and at, I guess I had done it right before that, but I had started before that. But then I went to Peabody Museum at Harvard, and I started drawing the animals. And the woman, one of the scientists there, was talking about the loss of habitat and the inevitable extinction of animals in relationship to loss of habitat in the next 50 years or so. And I thought, oh, this is what I should be paying attention to now. And, and then it sort of like someplace along the line so this is what I made at Alfred University, was these birds' eggs. I was working in the glass department with students. And then I started making these lithos, and etchings, which turned into the way that now I make drawings. And then this is about 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 years later, where it got into this sort of cul-de-sac of mythological something or other, inexplicable mythologies or something, of this piece called Born. But these were also really influenced by, now I can't remember his name, who made at Rockefeller Center, the lunar, Manship. Outside of museums, like sitting on pedestals out of the museum. So I wanted to make these pieces that could be like sort of public, outdoor public art, which is something that I had never, theoretically growing up with my father, it's something that should have occurred to me, but it never did. These I made, so all of this is from the early, mid-90s too. It's, I got a residency at the mattress factory in Pittsburgh, and I went to the Carnegie Mellon Museum, where they had a lending library of dead birds. And so I came with this big plastic, cooler containers full of birds. And then I got to make all these bird drawings from that. And that kind of got me on a quite extensive bird trip for a while. But I went to Morocco sometime in the mid-'80s, and from that, I learned about wall tapestry and that thing about what blanketing means, what does something that hovers between the wall and the space mean, that space for thinking about drawing. Or if you go up to the Met in New York, the rooms where they would have the large Buddhas or Kuan Yins, and then the paintings on the walls. So this, to have something between 3-dimensional and 2-dimensional representation, and what happens when you put those two things in proximity to one another, in terms of a kind of vibration, or what the difference is between making a 2-dimensional representation and 3-dimensional representation. That's why I loved the show here at the ICA of Barry LeVay's work, because he deals extensively with that pictorial space and 3-dimensional space. But so that was something about that, which is a lot if you think of all the drawings, which I'll show some of them, that I make, it is always about something about a blanketing. And then this one that's out of focus is I made in about 93, I was invited by the Angewandte Kunstmuseum in Vienna, the Museum of Applied Arts, to make an installation or something. And in that museum, the curator, the director, had invited artists to make the installation. And in one room, which was about a 40-foot cube, he had invited Donald Judd to do an installation of a small porcelain cabinet. So it's just a cube inside of this enormous room. But then they had this table of a dessert, like a long, table with mirrors on it, and then these sort of little frolicking banquet decorations out of porcelain. And I had never seen anything like that. And, so it was also something that resonated inside me for about 15 years or so. And then I was given the opportunity to make a show in Venice at the Querini Stampaglia, which is a house museum. And I had this idea to make everything sort of like fractured fairy tale, colonial American squatting, this Italian palazzo. Because, I thought like Venice is sort of on its way out when the U.S. colonial thing is beginning to take form. And so, but in any case, I made this porcelain, I made a table out of liquor boxes that we grained, and then I made porcelain figures from Pietro Longhi paintings, which were this also, it's the beginning of the time of creating domesticity and the ideas about domesticity that we live in today, and the representation of the domestic. So, there are all these sort of mothers and children doing this and that, various activities. And they're very, and he made tons of them. It was, he was a very popular painting, and he just went from, you could see he went from house to house and sort of slightly put on different heads on the people. So it was really, great to make work in relationship to other artists' work, which I think is something like I was much less conscious of when I was younger than I am now, how attractive it is to me now. And I that's something about age that I find odd. But, I see that with a lot of artists, that the older they get, the more they are in relationship to the past. But, for better or worse, maybe. But these are, I went to someone's house and their friends had given them this dead, freeze-dried deer for a wedding present, and so I saw it and, said, oh, maybe I needed to borrow that, and took it away on my bicycle for a couple of months, and made this print of it to give. It was girls who had gone to Skowhegan that I had taught, and so I made a print to give them a present, sort of a present, because they were really great. It was a wonderful time for my life. This is a sculpture. Oh, I'm not talking about those ones. That's the Holy Ghost, of course. The one on the left here is because of scanning now, because of computers, one can play in animation. So I like this idea. I made a drawing of a girl's head, made a lithograph, and then we printed that, and then we went out in the backyard at ULAE in Long Island and picked leaves and then made these poussoir leaves printed on the paper. And so we made an edition, but then, so part of the edition was static, was like the basic matrix was always the same, and then everything else moved, and then we scanned them all and made an animation, a random, like a computer-generated random pixelation. So, so she's sort of standing there like flickering a little bit from the hand painting, and then all the wind, it's like the leaves are all blowing around the wind. But I like that idea that, for me, it's really interesting to use one kind of information to generate another, like use painting, or not painting at all, but use like sculpture to generate drawing, to generate photographs, or to make prints, to make animation, like to keep cannibalizing and turning it. It's like keep turning and looking under the rock and seeing if there's a little more there that you didn't know about. I don't know. What can I call it besides that? Investigating. What? Tell me another word to call it. It's a little bit like gnawing and self-cannibalizing. So, it's like you're not like a rat in a trap gnawing its tail off or something like that. It's a little bit, it has that like a cyclical nature to it, because, often when you make something 10 years later, you'll like wake up one day and realizing like, oh, you're just making the exact same thing that you made 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And that, your preoccupations are really quite, like they can sort of take on these different guises, but it's quite consistent and literal in a way, and linear to some depressing ways, what you're really up to. But often you don't see it, till afterwards. Like I always say, like a little bit my work is like a protection racket for me. It's like my moat around me or something, and it's it's sort of healing. It's a place where I get to heal ruptures in my life, but that's like my very like personal thing. And then, and then I'm interested in, expanding printmaking or something like that, but basically, it keeps unfolding and changing itself and being, often self-referential or like a rock gathering moss. It keeps moving, but it keeps gathering, and it has little bits that are still attached to it from older work or from other sources. That one works so easily. This was a great thing I got to do, which was really fun. I met, because of working in Vienna, I met Coop Himmelblau, Wolf Prix, from an architectural firm in Vienna. And it was right at a moment, it was right when Claudia was in Ohio, and it was right at a moment, because of the Wexner Center and things, people were in a kind of freak out, frightened horror about how architecture was going to usurp art. And, how architects wanted to be artists, and somehow we had to, like, fight back or something like that. And, and I thought, like, oh, forget it. Like, let's play footsie instead, And so I was asked at the, Contemporary Museum in L.A. if I wanted to make something in this room. And it was a 40-foot cubic and by Izozaki, I guess. And no, IMP. And then, so I asked Wolf Prix if he would come make something for me, to work together. And then he told somebody that, Kiki's somebody who can make something with a circle, which was like a complete nightmare, because a circle is actually like one of the most difficult forms to make something with. But then I thought about, the constellations, the animals in the constellations. And so I made this, I think there's another slide of it so you can see his structure, but I made this circular constellation of maybe the northern hemisphere at that time, but just the animals and then the stars. And then I cast animal scat from New Mexico, that I found out on the ground in the winter time, and we cast each little poop individually and we put them together. There were like 5 different kinds of things, and so I wanted it like a kind of collapsing, like the earth. Like I always think about this, sort of like the blanket thing, like the space between, where the earth and the sky touch. That, like that energy or something. And then he made a big tower. But I also. The stars were made by a glass caster. We made the models, and then she cast them. And then the animals were all made in Venice by a man named Pino Signoretto, who was one of the great solid glass workers in the world. And so at the time, it was like the biggest menagerie ever made in history. And I thought, it's sort of like that in a nickel will get you someplace. Like, it doesn't mean anything. It has no meaning. It has no, but I thought, it still has, I'm very attracted to work. Pat Steer has made some things in relationship to it, or Jeff Wall, or in the mid-1800s of this sort of panorama idea, or the idea of the spectacle, art as spectacle, or processional, like spectacleness when you're looking at things. And so this had this sort of a little bit larger than lifeness to it. That was very attractive. Oh, those are that big? That big? Like between that big and that big? You know, the snake's probably 5 feet and the other things are that big. What were you saying? Oh, on the other side. Yeah, let me see if I can get them back. They were, this was in the early 80s, I guess, 79, 80. You know, I had a boyfriend who worked at the Strand bookstore, and he used to bring me books, and I was like completely phobic against owning books. I didn't want to have any. But he brought me a Gray's Anatomy, and before that, I got that Gray's Anatomy, I was like painting pictures of his guitar. You know, I was like, oh, I'm in love, you know. But then he gave me Gray's Anatomy, and it was like over. And I started like, you know, then I had Gray's Anatomy, and then I was in love with that. But it's, you know, because they'd say like, you know, there's like 3,000 inches of skin on the human body, and I could, you know, like the approximate average, and I'd go like, well, whose average? Is that white men's average? Or, you know, is that everybody in the world's average? Or, you know, so I made all of these pieces in relationship to that. And so this was about the pints of blood in the body. And I originally had them set up as pins, as you know, like 3 and 2 and 1. And it was called Game Time. It was just on a little shelf, and it was called Game Time because it was when we were at war with Nicaragua. And I thought, you know, it was, people were very cavalier in the expelling or whatever of people's blood around the world. And so I wanted to make a piece about that. But this was before I bought it to the show. So I had to have all this blood in the freezer. You know, in ball jars, and I sealed it with silicone because I didn't really know what was going to happen. But I used to live in the Lower East Side in New York, and when I moved there were, you know, many butchers and things like that. So I just bought gallons of, you know, pig's blood. I didn't really, somebody asked me to be in some, benefit the other day, and then I thought, maybe I can take out a pint of my blood and send it to them. But I didn't know. I thought I'm so sick of them. But you know, we'll see. But then, you know, because I thought, pig's blood, it was just, I didn't mean it literally. You know, it's just metaphoric. I mean, that's the thing, too, is like, I think for my work, for the most part, I meant things in very metaphoric ways. I didn't really mean them, or someplace between literal and metaphoric. But, you know, it wasn't so like in a linear didactic way that I want this to be about this or that. These are this thing between painting or between drawing and sculpture, which is, I guess, the traditional occupation of painting or something is in that space. But so, and these things come from printmaking, from making polymer plates, and then pulling waxes, which are like very low three-dimensional plates for used in photo engraving and things. And then I pull waxes off of them and then cut them out in various shapes so that I can get this very low relief. Like I'm very attracted to like Chinese tombstones, or up here you had all these glyphs, you know, or repoussé work. There was a lot of repoussé work or very low relief sculpture. And then the bird parts were all drawn in clay and covered with wax and cut out and then cast. And these were meant, they're a little bit from the crowns of Kuan Yin. Like she is always portrayed, you know, she's the Bodhisattva, the Avalokiteshvara of compassion in Buddhism. And she's always portrayed with the crown, with the Buddha in the center. But I like this very high crown that she wears, and so I made a lot of pieces someplace in relationship to that. So, you know, like, you know, for me, I'm just someone who is slightly voracious and curious. And, you know, if you go to museums, like even every once in a while, there's a lot of information in them. You know, like I thought, I have to come back tomorrow and go upstairs again and, like, you know, really spy at everything. Those are, you know, girls flying around the ceiling. This one, this was my first second outdoor public, but a real public sculpture is my first real public sculpture, and it's a fountain in San Diego at the Stewart Collection, and it's a woman standing on a tall column, which was a dead tree that we cast, and then she was made like an echo-shea because it was right next to the medical building, and then she had water coming out of her wrists, sort of falling down, which then the medical people thought it was about suicide and were really pissed off. But I showed, because they had these wonderful old papier-mâché echo-shays that, so I carved a little bit the musculature of the arms and the legs. But then at the last, I thought it was a little plain, and at the last moment I put on this star constellation of Virgo, I think. And it was a cast of a woman who was not a good friend of mine, but somebody I had used for sculptures a lot, and she was dying. So I thought it was nice to be making this sort of her into this sky goddess raining down or something next to the medical school. These are old things. This is sometime in between two things. This is also like a complete cannibalizing, rehashing of work. Like, I made a sculpture. I had a show in Israel at the Israel Museum, and I tried to make everything in the show in relationship to their collection and to the Bible, something in Bible things. And so this was originally a girl I cast a girl. I don't know, I think her mother worked at the museum, and I cast her like an 8 or 9-year-old girl standing up, and then I made an enormous coat, or like big, enormous cloth of felt with repoussé stars sewn on it, like some of the Torah covers that I had seen in the museum. But it was supposed to be like the young Virgin Mary, so it's like she's standing with the sky, because I always think how like one version of the Virgin Mary is like the continuation of Isis, is like the posturing of Isis holding Horus, and then others I always think is the continuation of Nuit, of the Egyptian sky goddess, having all the like embodying the stars. So I bought her home, and then at some point or other later reconfigured her into this. This piece was one of my favorite pieces. I was asked to make a show in Switzerland, and I thought, Switzerland, they have all those colored chocolates. Like, I had just been to Venice, and they have all those like green chocolate and pink chocolate and stuff in Venice that I obviously I had like my eye. I had a hard time getting past the stores looking at, and so I thought, I'm going to get this like a chocolate company to sponsor my work, and I'm going to make this like body as leaking orifice fountain, like fountains of life, and then the guy said, like, that's not going to happen. And so then I said, okay, I'm just going to make it all these different fluids coming out. Like, for about 5 years I made work just about like leaky orifices, like, the uncontrollability of life sort of going hither, not being able to kind of contain it or contain oneself, and just sort of the messiness of life or something like that. And I did it, but then they looked really bad. I mean, they looked like really like your worst fantasy of polychrome, antiquities or something like that. And and so then I just made it that sperm was dripping down his legs, and her milk was running down her front of her body, and it was like about, being thwarted. It was like two people who were thwarted, who were like isolated and thwarted, and sort of going nowhere. But and I made that. I guess that was the second really figurative work I made. The first one was a Virgin Mary echo-shea, and then this was the second one. This is also one like this one is just a flat sculpture of working with computers. I made something like a moon and stars, and I made the moon, and then somehow we pushed a button and all the stars attached itself to the moon. in random pattern. And I thought, like, that's also, like a really big part of making one's work is taking advantage of what is given to you. And, to be, to see what happens and see the generosity of, given moments. Neither one of these you can see. Oh, this is what I was telling this girl earlier about printmaking. The thing that I just discovered that I'm really excited about at the moment is that I do a lot of etching. I do a lot of small, like fussy lines, like completely obsessive, that take months on end to make them. And it just occurred to me like 2 months ago that I could blow that line up. So you can see here, like, and it's projected, it's, I don't know what that's, like 10, 12 feet high or something like that. You can really, if you went up to it, you could really see each line. And so I started now scanning my prints and blowing them up large, and some on glass, working with them on glass, but then some just as like sort of large prints on a wall. But, I think like the thing that's really great about etching is that you get to have this like extremely intimate relationship to what you're doing, and that each line is so fine, but then it's for me it's very exciting to see that then you can take that and turn it around again, and also take it in the computer and change the add some more ruffles on, or any go in any direction you want. This is I'll take a sip of water. This was... Also, you can tell me to stop talking when you want. If anyone's got a clock or something. This was one of the first... I started making these sperm at Experimental Glass Workshop in New York. And then I wanted to make this stomach, and a guy said if I made him a stomach out of styrofoam for a Pepto-Bismol commercial, he'd blow me the stomach. So he did. But I had to get linoleum on my floor after that, because I realized that there are some materials you don't want to work with in your house, and styrofoam is one of them. But this was, I made a show at the kitchen, and Amy Taubin, who was the curator there, her brother was a doctor, and she told me about how her brother had all these x-rays about people that swallow things compulsively. When I was a kid, we used to swallow string and then pull it back up our throats. I think that was like super cool. But, like other people like continue on and swallow, like chairs and like pens and paper clips and things like that. And, I'm like, borderline, I wouldn't say compulsive overeater, but I'm certainly an overeater or something. So it's something that I have thought a lot about in my life, had to think about, about like trying to consume, what does it mean trying to consume the world, but that these people were sort of literally doing, I was doing it emotionally maybe, but they were doing it like really, literally, not figuratively. And so originally I made the stomach because I wanted to jam it with things. But, then when I saw it, I thought, oh, it's so beautiful, just like that. And it was part of also this period of time about leaky orifices and, like thinking about like you're just a hole, with sort of like a big membrane of information traveling through it. Those are 3,000 square inches of skin from that same time period. And that was just in half because I couldn't get it out of my apartment on the 5th floor otherwise. And actually that's why I became a paper artist also, was because I lived on the 5th floor. And that's why I got an art career, because I made things out of paper, but it was just because I lived on the 5th floor. So these are also these sort of cut out, low relief, like drawn on wax animals called creche, which are, each one has a sunflower that goes in their eyes like the dead looking out. And that, something else, secret. The other side is a complete secret. This is another one of these things which you can't really see. It's a figure in a thicket. And it's the same thing. It's taking a drawing, like I go to my foundry, I take a drawing, and I go out in New Jersey to Johnson, and they would scan in my drawings, and then they'd vectorize them in the computer. We fix it up a little bit, and then we have it laser cut, laser water cut out of bronze, and then patina them. But so you can make just this thing between hovering, something hovering. For me to, I'm really interested in multiples, in small-scale sculpture. I haven't really gotten to large-scale sculpture yet, but I'm very interested in small, in intimate objects. In terms of printmaking, that postage stamps and, things printed on your, cell phone or whatever is a scale of printmaking that has its own integrity. That also very small objects, paperweights and door stops and, any tiny little knick-knacky thing you can think around your house has a completely fascinating history. And in terms of sculptural expression, each scale that you work in teaches you something different. And also the thing about making multiples, like making things that are, I was part of a group of artists called Collaborative Projects in the late 70s, early 80s. And one of the things that we did together was make stores of artist multiples. And, so I made T-shirts, and that's how I got into printmaking. But, also to make jewelry and these are lamps that I just made of moths and stars. But that, for me, also when I was younger, I was always the most interested, I had this fantasy, having grown up in the art world, I was a little weary of it all, and leery of it all, but I always thought, I'm going to go to art to go to Macy's. I want to go be in a department store. I want to make sheets in department stores. And my big ambition in life at that time was to come work at the Fabric Workshop, which is one of the few things I have. That's also for me is that I have had very little idea of what I want. Other than I'm going to make this thing today. A vision of how I want my life to look or how I think it should look or what it should be like, or I don't have so much desire like that. But the Fabric Workshop was one place I wanted to have as it was one of my few destinations of my life, and I'm very happy to have had the opportunity to go there. This is my first glass piece, which were these sperms, which we put fingerprints on, and we made each one individual, because I think you're one in millions, and that's so. It's actually because it's so extraordinary. I was making a piece with David Vonarovich, and we went out. Some guy got us into some medical place, and when I went out there, the guy asked me if I wanted to look at slow-moving sperm, and I went ooh, yeah, every day, but so we'd look under the microscope and they'd go, these sperm are too slow that they're never going to impregnate, and I don't really know what that they did to, they told people to stop wearing tight blue jeans or something like that. I don't know what it was. Exactly, that changed it, but it was incredible to see something alive, to be looking in a microscope and see life force. And then when I went to the glass workshop, I saw shot crystal, which is a very optically pure glass with a very high lead content, and it was it emanated light like the sperm did. And for me, that's been a big part of a lot of my material choices, working with Nepal papers or working with Gampi papers, working with sculpturally with paper in general because it has the translucency that skin has, or working with glass as a material, the same thing that it has, that it mimics skin, which is our, one of our spaces of life that we, associate. This is a lithographic print. It's about that size, I suppose. It was, I I think I have a friend of mine who, I asked if she would represent Saint Geneviève. I started making things of Saint Geneviève and the wolf. She was a patron saint of Paris. And she said I was allowed to do anything I wanted with her as long as I didn't make her hairy. So I made that born piece. I made her coming out of the deer, and then I think I have another one. I made her coming out of a wolf, and then I made her holding a deer, and I made all these things. But I got into that Little Red Riding Hood thing, for some other weird reason. But then I thought, oh, when the grandmother and the girl are cut out of the wolf, and are standing there, like that's such a strange image, like if you take it out of the context of the story. And I had read this book called The Wild Sargasso Sea. Was it Jean Rhys? And it was tremendously influential on me because it was about, taking a story and then telling the story before that story. And, I thought people do that a lot in literature, but they don't do it so much in art like that you could take an image and take it out of its pictorial continuity or whatever, and have it vivid, have it live in some other narrative. That you could change the narrative, you could start subverting the narrative, and that's somehow why I got into this Little Red Riding Hood stuff. But I liked this image of the girl coming out of the out of the wolf, the girl and the grandmother coming out of the wolf, and then I thought, oh, that's also like the image of the Virgin Mary on the moon. That same, like a vertical, a horizontal, and a vertical together. Because that's the most interesting thing to me. Like if I would go to school now, I would study, material culture and, maybe like the history of pictorial images, of imaging changing around. Like how one time something means something and then it takes on a whole other attributes of another belief system. I find that completely fascinating. Well, these are made at the same time with coins. I became a coin collector because I started collecting coins, defaced coins with holes in them, because they're part of women's decorative history and women's economic history. Because traditionally in many cultures, women sewed, put nails into coins, which like ostensibly defaces them and makes them have no value, but is the family's wealth. Like so. I thought that was sort of an interesting space, and I started making them, and then somebody got me a little bit into making them with gold coins, and I thought, well, that's a little out of my league, so I started selling them as multiples, and then out of that I started making jewelry, which I've been doing for about 10 years now. Oh yeah, this is Geneviève with the deer. Oh, it sounds like rats. Sorry. I'll say something about this one, because this was a big deal for me, this piece. This was, like, in a certain way, the one on the right, the beginning of my work, which was, I had spent a summer in Berlin with the artist friend of mine, Raimund Kummer, and he gave me, like, a little room to live in, and I made all these ceramic pieces, and I made all this rib cage that I was going to tie together. And I came back to New York, and I think when we fired them, they all broke, or a lot of them broke. And then I came back to New York, and then I was with another friend of mine on the bus going downtown, and he was saying, like, nobody's ever going to take you girls serious because you're just making your work out of cardboard and stuff. And, most of the people I knew made their work out of cardboard because that was readily available on the streets. But I got really angry, because he was saying, like, your work falls apart, it's not substantial, and it's not, made the way it's supposed to be. And then I sort of said, like, fuck you. Now you're going to pay for it. And so I went home and I glued my broken ribs together. I thought if I have to be a rib to begin with, I'll take it, I'll kind of stick them all back together and make this thing. And then I thought, now I'm going to make everything like sort of precarious and fragile and tenuous and sort of just, contingent on the circumstance. And, and then for quite a long time, that was a very big impetus in my work. But it gave me the idea that you use your deficits, that everything that works against you, you embrace, and you go like, yeah, never mind, I won't curse. This is a piece called Svaitava, like second choice, which was like factory seconds. It was, probably like 1990, something like that, 1989, 1990. And some reason people were talking about like, there was going to be this enormous black markets in organs, and people were going to steal organs all over the world. Like, like a little bit, which is true to some extent, but then also a little bit like America when they get into these like hysterias about things. And so then I thought about, oh yes, there's going to be all these sort of then the second choice organs getting dumped into other people's bodies. So I made all of these abdominal chest cavities and then just sort of dumped organs in. But they were all made from pressed clay molds, from looking at votive, Greek and Roman votive sculptures and press, the whole history of the world, half of it we know. Also, that was the thing, too, that when this person was criticizing me, I thought, we know the world through ceramics, history of, through ceramics, through things that, that often what appears to have no substantialness or integrity in the end is what lasts the longest. Like people in America also then get on this big anti-bronze kick, which is one of my pet peeves because, because bronze is traditionally a war material, so it's traditionally been recycled. So, like every war till now, basically, people gave all their parlor sculptures, all their jewelry, everything they own, and melted all down to make armaments. And so that there really isn't like a holding history of. We're just lucky of what metals have lasted, whereas things that weren't traditionally recycled, we get to still see. Like glass or ceramics, so and even paper or wax. You have great amounts of Egyptian waxes and things like that. I was trying to make. Was it with Jason? This guy's going under the sheep with sneaking in with the sheep, and then I made it, and my friend said, "Oh, you made a goat." And I was really pissed off that he said I made a goat, because it didn't look like a goat at all. It looked like a sheep. But then I thought, oh, that's a much better idea. I'll turn it into a goat, because I am a Capricorn. I thought, oh, I'm tied to my nature. I'm just, stuck being me. But so I made this sculpture of this woman tied under this goat, sneaking in. That's an outdoor sculpture. That's an indoor sculpture. But this is an outdoor sculpture that, this indoor sculpture came from Delancey Street. I was walking down the street and I found this rubber hand like Halloween hand in the gutter. And I came home, brought it home and put some of the water from my fish tank in it, and it grew algae all over it. And, it was because my father died, really. And I was thinking, life grows on death, like that we consume life to live, but that we, kill things in the process of doing that, even carrots and things. These are just things. I think we must be towards the end now, I think. These are printed drawings where they're, where I make a print and then a photo litho print and then collage things, and I like the same thing that I can take. And those are all, to me, in my mind, like cartoons for stained glass painting, which periodically, when I'm lucky, I get to do. It's just stuff, and more stuff. These things came from prints that I made at ULAE, because when I went there, Bill Goldston, who was the director or whatever, he told me, don't bring anything, just bring yourself. And I am like someone who can't stand being told what to do. So then I thought, oh, okay, now you're going to pay for it. So like for the first 12 years or something, I only made images of myself, just to bug him. But, it worked out okay. He's very accommodating to my, Oh, this I just showed because I liked, I got to have a retrospective 2 years ago at the Walker, and it traveled around a bit. But what was really exciting for me was that we made this sort of chronological show, just zipping around. But then I got a room in the center, like a curio cabinet, and that way I could make these juxtapositions and narratives for myself. So these were two sculptures, one of an usher and one of a flapper, and then that bird holding the coin, and then the ground of it was all covered with worms that I had made at a Sculpey. But for me, in installing things, it's always really important to cut the relationships between things, so that your mind is more free, so that you can, or like that you have a variety of materials together. This is a nice one, too. This one was I had a cat for 15 years that, told me what to do. And then it died. And so I made these photographs of myself. Like, I had wanted to make a pietà. And, I would, catch my cat in the house, and I'd, sit there and have my friend take a picture of me. And, the cat looked fat and healthy, and I looked fat and healthy. And it just didn't work. It didn't work. But then, the second the cat died, I was like, oh, okay, now it's our moment, And so then, I was, crying my eyes out. And I got my sister, and I said, oh, no, I have my cat. But then I wrapped my cat up and put it in a little basket and brought him down to my print shop. And I called up and I said, get a plate ready, And then I put the cat on the plate, and I traced it out so that I'd have the right size. Then I drew on the plate from it, and then I brought him home, and then I buried him eventually. But that was. Then I made all of these prints. I mean, the unfortunate thing is my poor mother died now, and so now she's become my latest victim, but of drawing pictures of her. But she would find it completely amusing. To be my victim. So, nothing would have given her more pleasure. So, it worked out okay. But, that's what I also think, everything is fair game. Everything in front of you, everything that happens to you is, it doesn't have to go in any direction. You can make your work as holistic as you can stand your life to be. This is the one with Coop Himmelblauer. They made this tower, this sort of skirt, as they talked about, and then this viewing thing. And then what I really realized what they were doing is really just making a scale model for something that they wanted to do. And they've already done this then in 3 buildings that they built. It has this exact same thing in it, of that form. So I realized it was quite cheeky and funny. This is stuff. This blanket I made at the fabric workshop. It was a jacquard loom blanket. I think, this is now, my old assistant said now I make things like McDonald's sculptures. Because when I was younger, I cast everybody's body because I was really against making any, I had no interest in my version of figuration. I thought this is completely boring to be thinking about figuration like that. And but then at a certain point, I was casting people who were younger than me, and then I said, that's not my experience anymore. And then, I don't know, then my assistants left, they went off to be artists, and I just thought, oh, now I'm just going to start making things by myself at my kitchen table. And so I started making these small figures. But now because of 3D scanners and stuff, I can take them to my foundry, and then they cut them in styrofoam. I work them in foam, and then I make these things that look like big dolls. But I'm a super crazy person for Ellie Nodelman's work. Who, if you don't know who he is, he's a really great artist and was tremendously influential of Americans' appreciation of folk art. And so now they're like that. But, sometimes I am just completely embarrassed by what I do. But, it's sort of like, you can get over it, too. No. I paint on glass, which I really love, with lead, like lead and gum arabic and water that you fire. And that I really like. It's the same thing. I thought it's the same thing with copper, that it's a resistance. Like it doesn't, whereas like now I've been making these hinter glass paintings, like rear glass paintings with oil on glass. But I don't like the absorbency of things, which is just, it's sort of like saying I don't like ink. I don't like painting on paper, or I like painting on a hard surface. That's interesting to me for some reason. But painting I did paint when I was younger, and I always say it's because I didn't want to go to Canal Street anymore to go buy paint, that I couldn't handle it. It was too stressful. But it really was that I didn't care about paint. I cared about the image, but I didn't care about the painting part that much. It was just expedient to me. Whereas painting on glass, like I would spend my life doing that if I could. This is my little wolf girl piece. And she was great because I made her with a collaboration with a friend of mine, Margaret Dwight, who's a composer. So when you get next to her, she was motion activated, and she would sort of sing this horrific song, like an abstract song, just made from sound, but it was like really this bemoaning wail, like a banshee or something. This was the first one on the left. It was the first time I made this collage, where I made a drawing of a girl, and then I started chopping it up, and then I made a chair behind her. And I think I was thinking about like Chinese ancestral paintings, like how the people are sitting in chairs. And it always annoyed me, like sculptures of men in chairs in parks when I was young. And then all of a sudden I went, oh no, that's the best thing on earth. So that's also like that one doesn't want to be attached to one's own history either. It's not interesting to do that. It's just what happened at a given moment. This is just like enough of this stuff. This piece I really love. That one, the one on the right. It's that I made for it for the De Young Museum. They asked me to make an installation when they rebuilt their museum now, and it was a very high ceiling. And I made these cardboard boxes, like a little bit like a spaceship or something, flying like a kite, sort of. And then this image of these two little girls, which was from a painting of colonial children that they had in their museum. And some reason to me that made me really happy. It's like, because for me, what's problematic to me about my work is how representational it is. Like I would love to have more overt abstraction, even though I think in a certain way, it's the more abstract, formal aspects of things that is what I'm really interested in when it really comes down to it, even though I don't talk that way about it. But I still always wish there was sort of a more abstract component. So that had it a little bit. Oh, come on. This must be the end. Okay, that's time to stop. Babies are crying. Thank you.